Yeah. Surprise, a little different than you're used to. Yeah. Dropping these bars on YouTube, knowledge I introduce you. Yeah. We chasing this money like it's the prize, it's the voodoo. Fugazi, fugazi, it's just a lie we buying into. We need some cars on deck. Get the rollies, get the Moe, all the Mars on deck.
Good evening, peeps. What's going on? How are we? Thanks for joining me. I am late today. I was planning to do this at like 5 or 6 o'clock, but the days have been hectic. So better late than never. I thought I'd jump in and get this kicking off from 7 o'clock-ish, and here we are. So I want to have this conversation because it's an extension of the podcast, to be honest. So yesterday on the podcast, I talked about breaking the credit card cycle. And the reason why that came up as a topic, and I can't believe we're 200 episodes, almost 200 episodes into the podcast now, because it's been running for 3 years. And only this year I've started to put it on, obviously, the channel on a Monday afternoon at 12. But the reason for this is because I'm speaking to more and more of my friends who are asking me, like, what's going on? They've got mortgages. Their mortgages are increasing in price now because of the interest rate rises. And a lot of them are saying, what should I do? And some of them don't have emergency funds. And what they're planning to do is use a credit card facility as an emergency buffer. Now, if they're in that boat, I'm sure that there'll be plenty of other people who are going to be in that boat. So I kind of wanted to share one key thing, really, that I wish someone had told me when I was young, naive, and a little green behind the wet behind the ears, as they say, and looking at the credit cards as though it was a lifeline. And that's very much how I viewed a credit card, as kind of a lifeline. And that isn't necessarily to say that that's the wrong way to view it for everyone, but it was certainly, in hindsight, the wrong way for me to view it, given how impulsive I was when I was younger when it came to spending, and how much lack of control I had. So this video isn't here to teach anyone to suck eggs or anything like that. That's not the intention here. But I do want to share some tips and maybe some thoughts from my side in terms of my experience, because I struggled with credit cards and overdrafts for 15 years, and credit cards were a big part of my debt. And I'm thankful that I'm out of it now, but it's a real struggle. And in fact, someone on the channel yesterday, after watching and listening to the podcast, actually said that he's in the position where he's paid down. In the next 2 weeks, he would have paid down a large, I think it was £46,000 in credit card debt. It's taken him years to get to this point, and in 2 weeks' time, he's going to be free of the entire ordeal. And I cannot even begin to imagine how much of a weight he's going to feel has been lifted off his shoulders when that happens, and how much of a personal achievement that is actually going to be as well. It's going to be an incredible feeling. And so I applaud him for putting that in the comment section, and thank you. If you are watching, thank you for putting that in the comment section as well. So look, I do want to go through some background, because I think this is really important. Obviously, since the pandemic and since interest rate rises, the usage of credit cards have moved. And I certainly remember at the beginning of this year, I was on Pack Lunch on Channel 4, and we were looking at consumer debt specifically. I want to share some numbers with you. I also want to share some interesting things that I found online this afternoon preparing for this, because when you think about credit card usage and credit scores, right, you think there's a correlation there. I'm going to share something with you which may actually just change your view very slightly. But as always, we're going to get into this in a moment. If you do get value from this, please just tap the like button. It takes about a second or so, but it means that after this live is concluded, the YouTube algorithm will look at the video and be like, oh, people did interact, people enjoyed it, and that means they're more likely to then recommend this to other people who may benefit from this topic specifically on the channel. It takes 1 second to do, but it makes a huge difference. I want to say a big thank you in advance. Let me just say hello to some people in the comments. Corsitors, welcome. Letters from home, welcome. To Wallace, how you doing? All right, there are some comments in here I'm going to come to. I'll come to these comments in the end. We'll have a bit of a discussion after we've gone through all of this. But let me just jump into the first thing that I just wanted to share with you, because I found this to be very interesting in doing the research for this this afternoon. Now, speaking of the average credit card score and how that translates to your credit score. Take a look at this. Now, this is from money.co.uk. So what they're basically saying here is that there are typically 9 types of credit card users, right? So you go from inactive to infrequent users to transactors to users with recent promotional balances, users with promotional balances, users with promotional balances, balance rollovers, infrequent revolvers, revolvers, and hardcore revolvers. Okay. Now, let's have a look at how their their usage of the credit cards actually translates to the average credit score. This is the average credit score, okay? So inactive users form about 0.06%, but have a look at this. Average score is actually the highest. And this is really, really interesting because people ask, well, if you don't have a credit card and you don't use it, is that going to be a negative thing? And I'm like, it's not necessarily a negative thing if you don't use a credit card, because you then lead into the conversation about credit utilization, the limit utilization on your card, right? Infrequent users, 3.14%. Actually, they've got the highest. Just over 1,054, roughly, is what their average score is, right? So the least usage has the highest score on this table, followed by inactive users at 1,033. Then you've got transactors. So that forms about 88.5% of the users in these categories, 1,027. You've got users with promotional balance, 1.89%. That's 198 roughly as a score. And then if you come all the way down here to the likes of revolvers, 11.1%, and that's 895 is their average score. Okay. Now, they do kind of give a little bit of a definition, I believe, down here in terms of transactors. So they make about 8.5%, will pay their statement balance in full every month, and generally have one of the better average scores in Experience Aggregated Bureau Index. And this is something else that's also worthwhile looking at as well, right? So revolvers, what was the definition for revolvers? I think the definition they gave for revolvers were people who continually just use the card and they're not necessarily paying off the balance, I believe, is what they hardcore revolvers. Here we go. Let's have a look here. Where was revolvers? Okay, so they say here, revolvers do not pay their outstanding balance in full every month and will incur a resulting rate of interest on their credit card debt. So revolvers. But have a look at this. Look at the comparison between the two. So if you're a transactor, someone who's paying down your credit card, the profile for these tend to be customers age 40 plus. They have high limits but low credit usage. So their utilization of their credit card limit is relatively low compared to the limit that they have. The sweet spot, they say, is around about 50% or so. Between 50 and 70 is what they normally say, but the lower the better. They pay off the debt regularly. They do not incur additional interest rates, right? Because they're not keeping the balance on there. So they're paying it off, saving themselves money that way. They have limited financial difficulty, or at least it paints the picture of limited financial difficulty. And this is something I talk about in my book. I talk about the fact that when you're dealing with credit scoring agencies, you've got to think about what the data tells them or suggests to them. If you are a revolver, for example, right, you're not paying down your credit every single month, the data will suggest that maybe you are under financial pressure, particularly if you're only paying down the minimum payment. So they say transactors here, limited financial difficulty, low likelihood of taking out new credit cards. And again, these guys, pretty high score, right? Third highest on this list. Let's have a look at the comparison between them and revolvers. So revolvers tend to be customers under the age of 40, low limits but high credit usage. So again, you might only have £500, but you're probably at the top of the credit usage on a month-to-month basis. Don't make regular payments. So it may be ad hoc payments here and there will incur additional interest rates because obviously they're not paying down the full amount. Prone to financial difficulty, or at least the data suggests that you are. It says here, high likelihood of taking out new credit cards. So moving from one credit card, balance transfer, so on and so forth. This is to put anyone into kind of like a box, but this is what the data is basically suggesting in this article right here. And actually very, very interestingly so as well. There was something else I wanted to show here. Was it on here? Well, I will talk about this right now because it's interesting. So this looks at a breakdown of UK credit card customer spending habits from January to February 2022. Now, this is post-pandemic, right? So, and I don't know what these numbers look like currently, but this is quite telling. And one of these actually isn't a surprise to me. So, restaurant spend increased by 149%. That's year on year. That's pre-pandemic levels. So it's surpassed pre-pandemic levels by 83%. This doesn't surprise me. Average credit card spend on things like holidays soared by 453%. That's because you get additional benefits and protection when you're booking things like holidays on a credit card, which is advisable to do. But also have a look at this. Entertainment spending increased by 171%. Year on, that's 64% compared to pre-pandemic levels. Now, you could argue that some of this is going to be down to the fact that, after 2 years of being locked down, you want to live a little. So I'm sure we're seeing some of these numbers come through. I would love to see what these numbers look like for 2023. And it also says that retail expenditure was, modestly at 14% year on year, but only about 15% exceeded the pre-pandemic levels. Very, very interesting stuff. It gets even more interesting when you start looking at some of the data that is coming out of the Bank of England. I do want to share this because this is something that I discovered on Stess Pack Lunch. So I can make this a little bit bigger. So this is the bit that I wanted to highlight. So consumers borrowed an additional 1.4 billion in consumer credit in February of this year. In net, and that's compared with 1.7 billion borrowed during January of this year as well. And this was split between 0.6 billion, so 600 million on credit cards exclusively, and 0.8% across other forms of borrowing, which will be things like, car finance, personal loans, so on and so forth. But a big chunk, 600 million, this is in February, on credit cards alone. And I remember on the show on Channel 4 that day, we were talking about the fact that, if you think back to February, we knew that the interest rates hikes were basically coming, and we knew that people are going to be finding it really, really difficult. And even then, it started to come out in some of the research papers that people already struggling to repay debt. And so, look, that's a little bit of context, okay? That's a little bit of context, and I think it's really important to kind of have this conversation around the fact that, number one, there is a place for credit cards. There is a place to use them. There is also a time not to use them. And this is the one golden thing that I wish someone had told me when I was wet behind the ears, first getting into, dealing with banks, and I didn't understand the finances one little bit. And I think that this will be something that I hope will help many people who may be in a position where some of our mates are currently looking to use credit cards as an emergency fund effectively. Now, it's not ideal, but we don't live in the perfect world. We don't live in an ideal world, right? So we have to do what we have to do. So this is the one thing that I think is going to be really, really important. And yes, we can give all kinds of, tips around the fact that, do balance transfers and all this kind of stuff. But I honestly think this one fundamental rule is what I wish people had told me that I think will really, really help. And I've said this on Instagram over the past week. I think if you're in a position right now where you need to use a credit card as an emergency fund or a source of funding, it's really, really important to draw up rules of engagement. Rules of engagement. What do I mean by that? To have a really detailed list, like a scenario list, right, of instances where you will and will not use the credit card, right? So understanding fully well, right, what is an emergency? Because if you are going to use a credit card as an emergency fund, detail out, we will class X, Y, Z as an emergency. We will not class A, B, C as an emergency. And I think that's really, really important, because at least you're defining the rules of engagement. You're defining when the card might be pulled out and when it isn't going to be appropriate to be pulled out. And I think it's going to be successful in helping you do one thing. And if this one thing is the one thing that keeps you from, racking up more debt than you need to, I think is really important. And again, we think about this from a behavioral point of view as well. If you're able to have clear rules of engagement, right, we will use it for this list of scenarios, we will not use it for this. It allows you to be laser focused on what is and what isn't an emergency. And it allows you to have those parameters. Now, from a behavioral point of view, that becomes very, very important, because if you're able to be as disciplined and as focused as you probably need to be in these circumstances where you are going to have to borrow money, where you're going to be paying it back, depending on obviously interest rates and so on and so forth, you may get one with a 0% purchase, but even still, these guidelines are going to be important. It means that from a mental point of view, you're also putting blockers in. So your thought doesn't automatically go to, right, I'm going to use the credit card because I've got it. It's not going to be the first port of call that you're going to go to. And I know that that may sound stupid off the bat. And when you hear it like that, it may sound ridiculous. But believe me, in practice, it's really going to help you. And from a behavioral point of view, it will make something click that instills that discipline, that instills that sense checking, right? So a couple of things that would be an emergency, and you're going to make up your own list here, but things like, okay, maybe the car broke down. Maybe that would be classed as an emergency. What would not be an emergency, though, is I feel a little rubbish. Let's go shopping. Or let's go and have a really nice time on a Friday night because I need to cheer myself up. That is not an emergency. And it's being really, really clear on what those things are and are not. Because as human beings, it is so, so easy. And I know that I've done this a million times before. It is so, so easy to persuade ourselves, yeah, I feel like rubbish. I need to cheer myself up. And then the credit card is there. It's so, so easy to do. I've done it a million times. So having that mental fortitude. Couple of other things are really important as well. And I did mention some of this on the podcast yesterday around breaking the cycle when it comes to credit cards specifically. And that is, it's really, 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 really important to kind of be aware that if you are in a position where you have credit cards right now and you're doing 0% balance transfers, or you're trying to pay down that debt over a period of time. And again, I'm taking this from personal experience, so I can definitely speak for myself. May not be able to speak for you watching this or listening right now. But what I did is I would do a 0% balance transfer to a new card, and think, hey, I've got some breathing room, right? And that's the great thing about 0% balance transfers, breathing room. You haven't got to worry about that interest, right? And so you can make the minimum payments. It's not all going towards interest. And then what I did was, because I felt I had breathing room, I would relax. I wouldn't be as focused and as disciplined as I needed to be. I wouldn't stick to any kind of stringent repayment strategy in terms of, right, minimum payment is this, I'm going to throw in X amount to make sure I clear it during the 0% window. And foolishly, I would keep the other card that I transferred the balance from. I would keep it, and opposed to just cutting it up, getting rid of it, I would keep it. And when something else happened, which it always did, where I needed a little bit of cash, and because I didn't have an emergency fund, I then used that other card, and that would open the floodgates yet again. And this may sound familiar if you've been in this situation. It's so, so easy to do. So what I always say to people is, look, cut up the card that you're 0% balance transferring from, because you don't want to leave yourself with any temptation. And in addition to that, one thing that I definitely learned to do is, even the card that I am paying down, the 0% balance transfer, right? You're going to get to a stage where you're going to have headroom in the credit card, right? So let's just say you balance transferred $2,000, right? You're at your limit, transfer $2,000, you're making the payments. You could be 6-7 months into this, right? And then all of a sudden you've now paid down, I don't know, you've paid down 500 quid. So you've got a 500 quid headroom. I always used to carry not just the card I transferred from, but the card I'm also paying down with me at any given time. And again, it would open myself up to be tempted. And I am a spontaneous spender. I know that about myself. I've had to put triggers and mechanisms in place to manage my triggers. But I would then, once I see headroom, psychologically, I register it in the back of my mind. I go spend. And again, this may sound familiar to people who are watching. So again, cut up the old card, but the one you're paying down, stick it in a drawer somewhere, forget it. But the whole point is that, we need to be as smart as possible. And particularly where we find ourselves in an environment now where I can't believe we're still in the cost of living crisis. It's nuts to say that. We're still in a cost of living crisis with interest rates going up, where people are feeling even more squeezed. Certainly right now, it's really, really important to be extremely disciplined in our approach. I mean, there is lots and lots of data that I saw this afternoon around credit card usage, the patterns, so on and so forth. I'm actually just going to show you this one here just to give you an idea of the scale of things and the scale of credit card usage, because it is a little staggering, to be honest. So between June 21st and January 23, the number of credit card transactions per day was consistently higher than 10 million, with the exception of January 2022. That's the amount of times credit cards are used every single day. 10 million. If we go all the way up here, there are some very, very interesting stats. In 2023, an estimated 34.5 million people have at least one credit card. The average person has 1.7 credit cards, according to this. 1.7 credit cards, so more than one. It says here the total credit card spend in the UK is 18.8 billion. That's per month. Now, let's talk about investing, right? Because people talk about what stock should you be buying in a recession when inflation's high. Banks, debt collectors. I spoke about the Harley Davidson issue in the States maybe last week or the week before, where there were so many people that bought Harley Davidsons during the pandemic in the States that now, with interest rates rising, people are not able to keep up with their payments for the Harley Davidsons. And what's basically happened is they don't have any debt collectors to go collect the money. These are the kind of, you look at the scenario, you look at what's going on, and from an investment point of view, I will argue vehemently that banks are going to be making money hand over fist right now because people need this facility. Also says here 58.7 million credit cards were in issue in the UK with UK residents as of January 2023. That's the beginning of this year. I would hazard a guess that that has increased quite significantly because of where we find ourselves right now and the landscape in which we find ourselves as well. So look, again, I'm not here to help put people in boxes or to teach people to suck eggs. But what I do know is from my own experience of using credit cards, and again, there is a time and a place for credit cards. They play a very specific role and they can play an important role. But if you are in a position where, like some of my friends, you're going to be using credit cards as an emergency fund, please just bear that golden rule in mind. Please have some rules of engagement, some scenarios that you've worked out and listed to say, this is when we are going to use it. This is when we are not going to use it. I wish someone told me that when I was 18, when I first took out my first credit card, when I thought the banks were looking after my best interest and it was a lifeline. And I reference that line in the book all the time. That's how I thought. I thought it was a lifeline. I mean, how stupid and naive was I? We can laugh about it now, right? It all worked out okay, but hindsight's a beautiful thing. But I was so naive, honestly. And so look, we don't get taught a lot of this stuff in school. A lot of us, go through life and we trial and error these things. Please have that in mind. Now let's have a look and see what everyone is saying in the comments, because there's still quite a few comments in here. So let's see what's going on. Guys, there are 69 of us at the moment. It would mean a lot if you can get the likes. If we can get the likes up to like 35, 40, that would be absolutely amazing. Again, it will take a second for you to do, but it just means that once this is ended, the YouTube algorithm will look at the video and be like, did people find value in it? And if they did, if they recognize that by giving a like, they will then recommend this video to someone else who comes after you who may need to listen and hear and get some of the tips that we've spoken about right here. All right, let's see what's going on. Carly, you're in here. What's going on? Right, Two Wallace. Came here to like and leave. Only have a credit card to boost my score to get a mortgage and cancelled it. I never touch it again as it changes my mindset when it comes to spending. Yes, I mean, the psychological part of finance is absolutely huge. It's taken me years to kind of get round kind of like why I make my own decisions and stuff, and why I used to spend money in the way that I did, and how competent I was in making decisions, and if there were any triggers and or trends that meant that I would spend money in particular ways. I did it through journaling. There weren't any behavioral assessments per se available back then. But I have been working over the past 6 to 8 weeks on behavioral assessments specifically to help people measure, identify, and improve those things. So, if you're interested in taking an assessment like that, look at the description box. There are 4 that I built. There's one around competency. So, how competent are you with financial decisions? There's one on your money personality. Are you a saver? You're a carefree spender? What are you? There's one that talks a little bit about spending habits. So what are your triggers? Is it certain periods of the month? Who, like, why do you spend money the way you do? There's spending one. There's another one as well, which I always keep forgetting, but there are 4. Unfortunately, they are not free. It's $9.99 plus VAT, so it's $11.99 roughly for you to take it. But if you do take it, it will probably take you between 5 to 10 minutes to complete each of them. But what it will do, it will give you a profile, and it will give you some practical tips. What each of the, so your score, it will kick out, right, you are this. It will tell you exactly what it means, and it will give you some tips to actually improve it, things to think about as well. So I put a lot of work into those, but they're very, very important. And I started thinking about this as I was writing the book, because writing the book was quite therapeutic in a way. I had to think back and think, actually, how did I kind of navigate around this? And it was because I had to do a lot of the hard work. And so the behavioral assessments will help you maybe not do some of that hard work necessarily on your own. Ensol saying here, had a credit card and overdraft when I was 21 and got a few K in debt. Unfortunately, I learned very quickly. Mate, you're the smart one. This is what I'm telling you. I was so stupid. I was so naive. I didn't learn. The easy way. I learned the hard way because I buried my head in the sand for a while, and I couldn't bear to look at it. So, mate, good for you. Good evening from Scotland, Stuart. How you doing, mate? Thank you for joining. Carly's just saying, I am now at 5% utilization across 40K. That's amazing. So I wonder how that translates to your score then, really. Have you tracked your score? If you're using things like ClearScore and stuff, I would love to see your correlation between your balances dropping and your score going up. So as you paid it down, what impact has that had on your credit score? I'd love to see that, because there has to be a correlation, and there will be a correlation. It would be nice to be able to quantify it though in terms of numbers. Magnolia saying here, today I have never used a credit card and do not ever plan to. My thinking is if I can't pay for an item with my debit card, then probably I can't afford it, and hence I don't have to have it. Mate, my partner is exactly the same. Doesn't deal with credit cards, never has. She doesn't see it that way. Again, I think that I will use credit cards for things like holidays, because you get a little bit of protection and stuff like that, right? Or if I'm making an expensive purchase, I'll use credit cards purely because of protection. But beyond that, I don't really ever use them, really, to be honest, because there's no point. I mean, I've got a charge card for my business, but that's my business. So it's completely different. But yeah, I try to stay away from credit cards now because I don't necessarily need them. I'm lucky enough I do have a good financial cushion. I've got an emergency fund there. So, and ever since I've had one, it's removed my reliance on having to use a credit card. And I think that's the beauty of being really intentional around, right, what does my landscape look like in terms of my finances if I have this cushion? Like, having an emergency fund is a game changer. It really, really is. It changes your mindset. It changes your outlook. It helps you feel a lot more relaxed and secure. And it's hard to get it, but once you get it, it's amazing. It really, really is. Yeah, colleagues are saying here, like to spend it to collect rewards. And I would say that that's a really, really good user case as well for credit cards. So things like air miles, for example, right? So if in the distant or the near future, we do end up moving to Dubai, one of the plans was I'll commute back and forth every single month. In that instance, I'll be getting either an Emirates or a British Airways credit card where I'd get the air miles, because if I'm going to be traveling that frequently, I would rather use a credit card, accumulate the points, and then get a free flight. But that makes sense if you're getting rewards and stuff like that. So again, there's a time and a place, and they definitely do play a role and can benefit you sometimes. It's just being aware of how to use it properly. And it's just saying here, me too. I like it for security when purchasing online for the points. Love the Amazon and Sainsbury's vouchers. Yep, I would agree with that. Richard, is it okay to use a credit card to rent a Porsche to make myself look more attractive to the opposite sex? I'm sure that's how that works. And frankly, I need all the help I can get. Mate, listen, don't. Don't. If you can, just don't. Nah, mate, don't use it for that, please. Please don't. Oh my god. It's a good one. Carly just saying here, laugh out loud. No, Richard. But better to say for the Porsche. I tell you what, oh mate, listen. I don't know why, but I've been more. I've never driven a Porsche or anything, and obviously I drive electric, and I have previously looked at like the Taycan and thought, oh, that would be nice because it's beautiful. It's beautiful, right? It looks really nice. The practicalities of it aren't that great compared to like I've got a Tesla at the moment, and I've had mine for like it's going to be 7 years this year, going on 8. So I put a lot of miles on it, and I get tempted sometimes when I see one. I want to go have a look at one. It's beautiful. But one, I tell you what, I have been looking at that I've been so drawn to. I've seen so many of them, GT3 RSs, and just that range of car. But they are mega expensive. But they're just beautiful machines. So, Richard, mate, I get the allure to Porsche. I really do. They're beautiful machines. I haven't driven one. I'm not sure that I do want to drive one because I am a spontaneous spender. So, it will be another saga of what happened when I bought the Tesla. It was such a, oh my god! Talk about spontaneity. I went to go see a client, and mid conversation after we've had our meeting and we've talked about business, he goes, "Oh my god!" And this is back in 2000 and this is in 2015. He goes, "Oh my god, have you driven a Tesla?" And I'm like, "What's a Tesla?" And he goes, "Oh my god, I drove one the other day and that thing is stupid fast." He goes, "You need to go to test drive one. You have to." And I left there thinking, what the hell is a Tesla? And then about a week later, I had to get up early for work for a meeting. I left the house probably about 5:30 in the morning. I was on the M54. And like that time in the morning, it's pretty quiet. And I'm smashing it down the M54, right? Going pretty quick. I'm not going to say how fast. Going pretty quick. And this thing went past me in complete and utter silence. And I was like, what the hell is that? Get onto the M6. I caught up with it, realized, oh, it's a Tesla. And I was like, immediately, I'm thinking, yeah, he told me about this. So I went to find one to test drive. And the minute I test drove one, I was like, okay, I've got to have it. And me being a spontaneous spender meant, there we go. Here's a deposit. Give me a car. Didn't even think about it. One of the stupidest things I've done, but also I would say it's paid, it's served its purpose because I've had it for 8 years now. And I'm going to run it into the ground. I think it's got something like 172,000 miles on it right now. And I've got free supercharging for life. So at the moment, it's free motoring. All I have to do is MOT it, which doesn't cost me a lot. I haven't got any road tax. I need to change tires every year. And I don't charge at home because of the supercharging is free. And I've got a supercharger 5 miles down the road from me. So effectively, I've got a free car. So I paid a lot of money for it. And it was a stupid thing to do at the time. But it's definitely paid its dues. But cars, mate. Cars are such a... so tempting. Sam is saying it. I got 31-month interest free from Virgin for £6,000, then went up to £10,000. Put £3,000 in savings account. Will pay back Virgin in 30 months. Yeah, so you've done a cash withdrawal to put some money aside. That is definitely a way to go about doing it. I mean, from a credit score point of view, they don't necessarily like it when you use your credit card for cash withdrawals, but I think in this instance, it's all about making sure that you do what you feel is going to secure you. So what I've said for the credit card is what I'm going to save for this £3,000 that you've now put into a savings account. Make sure you have really tight rules of engagement of when you will dip into that £3,000. Be really clear on what is and is not an emergency, because now it's there in the account. You'll be able to look it, you can see it, and it's very easy to succumb to temptation. So just be mindful around those rules of engagement, Sam, I guess. Just saying it's an emergency. Listen, Me and you probably need to have a little chat offline, mate. I'd love to know what kind of emergency you need a Porsche for. But hey, I know like things happen in life, so I get you. I get you. you reckon I'll okay it? Give me the full details and we'll have a little chat. It's highly unlikely though, mate. It's highly unlikely. Missy. Missy's also said to Richard, attracting the opposite sex or posted with a Porsche is not an emergency. Not in capitals. I would agree with her. I would agree with her. Oh, good man. Let's it's a lousy Porsche t-shirt. To be fair, mate, someone offered to send me a Tesla t-shirt the other week. I should have gone back to him. I didn't. I didn't go back. There's a good conversation going on between people. Sam here is also talking about. So there's a question actually. This is directed at Sam. Isn't it a cash advance? I think it would be. I assume, yeah. Does it cost you a lot in interest, or is it interest free for cash advance too? It depends on the card. Sometimes they will charge you like a fee to withdraw, typically from a credit card, but it depends on the card that you have and the provider that you have as well. Covert Camper is saying that's crazy. I am very frugal. Only reason to use one is to build credit score. Just having one bill, such as electric bill, but immediately paying it off each month, then cutting it in half. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people will take that approach. If I could do my time again, I probably would have told myself that as well. Like, use the card for a small amount each month. And when I do coaching with people, this is what I say. If you're trying to build your credit score, if you've got, it doesn't matter what you've got on the credit card. If it could be 100 quid or 200 quid is your limit, but use like a small amount, pay it off, and just do that over a 6-month period, because you'll see that translate to an increased score over time. So it's all about being disciplined and understanding how it works. Unfortunately, back in my day, and this may be a little bit of a cop out, but it was certainly true. I didn't understand the right questions to ask. I really didn't. And no one really explained. Someone said, look, just make sure you make the minimum payment. That was it. And I wasn't intelligent or smart enough, or I was too naive to ask good questions, because I honestly just thought, oh, well, the bank is looking after my best interest. And I honestly thought, well, everyone has this, right? Like, I'm an adult now, so if everyone has it, I should have it as well. Really, really weird way of thinking. Strange world, huh? Strange world. Missy, Pete, should I apply for a credit card now to build up credit for a mortgage later, whilst I'm still unemployed but have a very large savings pot, or should I wait until I've gotten a job first? A couple of things intersect there, mate. First, your credit card application will be influenced by whether you have a job or not, because what they're doing is to determine your limit. They're going to have a look at your income. So because you may not be able to show an income, you may only be offered cards with a high interest rate, so maybe like a Vanquish, something like that. But what you could do is, if you're using apps like ClearScore, checking your ClearScore app, because based on your score, you're going to be recommended cards that match your score. And some of them will tell you that you're already pre-approved. So you could do that. I think it's definitely worthwhile trying to build your credit scores sooner rather than later. So by doing it now, you're getting ahead of the curve, if you will, and you're being proactive in terms of actually building your credit score, in opposed to waiting until you're ready for the mortgage. So apply early for sure, I think, at least, but just be mindful that on the application form for the credit card, they will ask for income and all that kind of stuff, whether you're employed, and that does go into the qualification criteria, because they want to know that if you do spend money, you can actually pay it back. And unfortunately, in all of the applications that I've ever been through, or I've ever seen, they don't necessarily ask you what savings money you have set aside. It's all based on income. So it may impact you, it may not. But if you are using apps like ClearScore, go and see what you might be already pre-approved for, because that might give you a better chance of being accepted and stuff. But by all means, definitely give it a shot. On that, please make sure as well, when you do the application, that they're not going to do a hard search. You want to make sure that you can find a provider that does a soft search first. A soft search isn't going to leave a mark on your credit score. So if you have a decline, so for example, let's just say they do a soft search and they say, no, you're not eligible. no record on your credit score. Whereas if it's a hard search and they say no, that will show up on your credit score and it will knock back your credit score as well for a period of time. So in all of this, make sure that the provider or the lender that you approach will do a soft credit search during the application, or at least a pre-qualification towards an application. All right, guys, we've got 34 likes and 81 people on here. Please do me a favor. Again, it takes a second for you to do that, but if we can get the likes up to 40, that will be amazing, particularly if you have got some value, if you learned something from this conversation, that would be really, really helpful. Let's see what Sam is saying here. Small percentage fee. Yeah, small percentage fee he's saying here up front, but we'll get money back in 30 months. Do your own research. Is saying, hi Pete, I have 3 credit cards which I don't use. I have one that has a balance transfer which I'm paying off, no interest. Should I cancel the other 2? Will it affect my credit rating? I mean, it's all about credit utilization, right? So if across the 3, your credit limit is £3,000 and you're not using 2, and let's just say you've got £1,000 on each, that means you're only using 30% of your overall credit limit, right? Your credit allowance. That works in your favor. So the only thing to bear in mind is you can cancel it. You can cancel the 2 that you're not using, no problem at all. But that will definitely impact your credit utilization. So let's just say, you've got £1,000 on that third one that you've got the balance transfer on, and you've got 500 quid balance on that £1,000 limit. Well, your utilization is 50%. So it could cancel itself out. It may not. But there's nothing wrong with, keeping the cards open and not using them. I mean, some people say that has an impact. I don't think it has a huge impact, really, to be honest. It's not going to have a detrimental impact if you keep them open and don't use them, and I don't think it's going to have a detrimental impact if you cancel them either. Yes, you might see a bit of a knock, but it's not going to take you from excellent to like poor or fair or something like that. So it's really going to be a personal choice, mate. I mean, I have maybe 2 credit cards in like one of my drawers in here somewhere. I never carry them around, but I know that they're there. If I ever needed it, I can pull them out, go use them. But they've been in one of these drawers now for probably 4 years. Not used them, and my credit score's still pretty decent right now. So that's kind of really a personal preference, but I don't see any harm in keeping them if you wanted to, mate. Yeah, Richard's just saying that if your income is 0, that he doubts that they'll give you a card because it is based on income, unfortunately. But again, if you're in a clear score, then definitely have a look and see what you might be pre-approved for. Jester, psychologically, I budget better seeing a balance go up than go down. So I slap 100% of expenditure onto them. I overspend with debit cards. That's interesting. That's really, really interesting, mate. And this is where you have to choose your weapon of choice, the thing that you know is going to work for you. So your instance, that works for you. And I reckon you probably have some really good practices and processes in place to make sure that you're able to pay things down quite a bit, and you keep yourself solvent even though you're using both your credit card and the debit card. So, and there is nothing wrong with maxing out your credit card on a monthly basis, paying it all off. There's nothing wrong with that. If anything, that's also going to help your credit score because you're paying off your balance in full. So yeah. David, let's have a look at what David's saying here. Magnolia Brown, thinking is wrong. If you have cash, why use it? Use the credit card first and use their cash and then pay it off, David. I mean, there is this conversation about, debt utilization when you use debt. I mean, someone did said on the video from yesterday on the podcast saying, what do I think of using 0% balance or 0% cards to purchase things? So I'm like, well, if it's free money, it's free money. At the end of the day, the key thing is, do you have the ability to pay it back? And are you going to remember to pay it back? Because some people are just really, really like disorganized and just busy, where they'll use something and they'll just forget, I need to make a payment. And that's where automation comes in, right? So if you can get a 0% purchase card, and you can automate, right? Okay, pay the balance off every single month when the statement comes out from my account. Then you physically don't have to do anything. It makes the whole process easier, right? But you're using other people's money to be able to do that. I think you really start to leverage that kind of stuff when you really get into, like, buying big things, like really really big things. Then it really makes a difference because you're not utilizing your own capital. So part of what David is saying here is actually spot on as well. But again, it's all about how you feel about using credit facilities. If you have a negative connotation towards it, then to get used to what David's saying here is a massive psychological shift. Like, your brain has to switch to be able to do that, and some people aren't in that space where they want to do that, and so it swings and roundabouts. Whatever works for you, picking your poison, picking your weapon of choice is the most important thing here. What's the rule? The rule is to make sure that with any credit card or any type of debt that you have, to have clear rules of engagement around what you will and what you will not use it for. So what is an emergency, what is not an emergency, especially if you're going to be using credit cards for things like like as an emergency fund, as most people are now. Being very very clear so that you're focusing, you're disciplined on, right, this does not fall into the category of an emergency. I've got to find another way to figure this out, and opposed to something happens, you haven't got cash, credit card comes out, boom, you use it. That can be a very very slippery slope. So there needs to be measures. Discipline is important with this. I'm due for a new phone. I think I'll buy it outright. That's what I do. I literally, I mean, I've upgraded recently to a 14 purely because I use this for video work now. So opposed to me carrying the camera that I'm shooting this on, which is an XC4, I can, like, the cinematic mode in this is amazing. So I bought this outright, and I've just stuck in a SIM only card. I'm paying like £10 a month. Like, if I went and got this phone, which is a 14 Pro Max on contract, it will be in the region of maybe 70 to 80 quid a month. Now, I know that I paid obviously an outlay up front to have it, but still, I'd rather do that than, have it on finance and have that 70, £80 a month payment, just from a psychological point of view, for me, at least. Yeah, Carly's just saying here, agrees with David. I think if you use credit cards wisely, it's in your benefit. I too have learnt the hard way. Half Viking, never had a credit card. I don't intend to have one either. I've been paying down my mortgage more aggressively since watching your videos recently. Feels good, amazing. And that's the crazy thing, right? Like, when you get into, like, again, this is all about psychology. When you get into the what point of, right, I'm going to be really focused and purposeful in doing this one thing, it's amazing when you start to see either debt coming down or savings or investments going up. Something else just kicks in. It's like, actually, you know what? This it feels good, and it's a reinforcing positive habit, right? That gets you on a roll, and it's quite powerful when you really are able to harness it. And the next step for you, mate, is, the mortgage will be paid down a little bit earlier on. The headspace, the freedom that you're going to gain is going to be just huge. It will benefit other areas of your life as well, because you won't feel as stressed out. You won't feel as much pressure. Like, we talk about money, and it's such an important, pivotal thing. It influences so many areas of our lives. And if we can just get this one thing right, just being really purposeful, the impact it can have is absolutely huge. Adam was saying here, got rid of all of my credit cards 10 years ago, had best financial decision I've ever made. I only use PayPal for online, and it's been fine. Debit card for anything else. Fantastic, mate. Good one. He's also saying here, no credit cards and still able to build a 999 credit score. And again, you got to think your credit score is based on your credit history. So you've got a history of paying your debts back. That's really what they're looking at. And they're looking at other factors as well in between that, but it's a big contributing factor to it as well. Thank you very much. Do your own research. Keep it up until I pay off the debt. One card. Good man. Missy. Nice. You know what? This is what I love, right? Because you guys come on we have a little chat, or at least I'm talking. I'm talking the whole time. It feels like I'm talking at you, because I can't get the response from you verbally. But when I look at like the chat section, these kind of things I like to see. You guys are having conversations with yourself, with each other, right? And this is great. And Missy's saying here, Adam, that's amazing. But what steps did you do to achieve 99 score credit score without credit cards? Fantastic, because conversations are happening in the background, and you get to learn from each other, and it's not just me. And yeah, I do know a lot, but I'm not like the Ayatollah of finances and stuff. And it's nice when you have a community of people that are just willing to like have a conversation openly and ask each other questions and get answers back. And again, this is one of the reasons why I enjoy doing lives now, because in opposed to, filming videos. Well, I say filming videos, scripting, filming, editing, uploading, doing all the research. That is hard work. And like, yeah, don't get me wrong, I do like the editing process. 93% of the time I enjoy it, but nothing beats like everyone having a conversation like this in the comment section. Like I love it. It's really, really good. You can learn from each other, and we talk about the fact that we don't often talk about money here. Like, this is what we're changing. It's great. It's fantastic. So thank you everyone for having conversations with each other in here. I'm just scanning for questions. So I'm just mindful of time. We're at 51 minutes right now. So let me just have a look and see what questions I can get to before calling it an evening. If you can do me a favor, though, 49 likes. Can we get that to 50? One more, if you can be so generous. That would be amazing. Really good conversations. Right, here we go. Anne C is asking here, really good question. Other things beside credit cards to build up your credit score: pay off utility bills on time, pay off broadband on time, register to vote. Register to vote on the electoral roll is a biggie. It's a big, big one. Now, obviously, the reporting happens a month in arrears, but once it comes on, oftentimes you'll see a big jump in your credit score by registering to vote on the electoral roll. And the reason for that is, and I talk about this in the book, and you guys probably know this already, but if you think about it, right, what are the banks looking for? What do they want? They want to know that whoever they're lending money to, number one, has an income, number two, has somewhere to live, and number three, has lived there so that they can track them down. If you have someone who's absconded, or has moved around quite a bit, 5 different addresses in 3 years, that for a bank is a red flag. Whereas if you've been on the electoral, where they know that they can look back and be like, oh, he's been there for like 4 years, 5 years, 2 years, 1 year. Like, okay, they have roots down. So if anything goes wrong, we're probably going to be able to find them. I know that sounds like very big brotherish, but that's essentially what the banks are looking for. They want to minimize their risk as much as possible. So things like registered on the electoral roll is a biggie when it comes to trying to improve your credit score and stuff. I love this. Covert Camper. Focusing on saving 55% income a month to pay mortgage rapidly, 4 main expenses in life. That right there, mate. Listen, if you manage to do that, because people will say, we'll look at that and think, hey, it's not much. That would be an achievement, mate. If you could save 55%, so you keep 45% on your expenses and everything, that would be pretty amazing. If you do it, I would love to hear from you. If you can just message me on Instagram, because I'd love maybe to take some of the details and to use it as a case study. Keep you obviously, anonymous and stuff, but as a case study to say this is how someone has actually done it. That would be amazing, because a lot of people think that is impossible to do. And if you do, that would be an achievement to say the least. So please let me know if you do, mate. Oh, thank you, mate. Thank you very much. I like having everyone here. So thank you. Like I said, doing these lives is kind of like one of my highlights of the day when I am here doing them. I am trying to come up with a routine, a schedule that really, really works. I've been lucky because I've not been as busy as I was before. So I've been more in the house and more looking behind the scenes of my business. So I've been in the house, so I can do these a little bit more often now. But I will announce a proper schedule. So it might be podcast on a Monday, live session on a Tuesday, take a break on a Wednesday. We'll do one on maybe a Thursday, maybe on a Friday, or interchangeably Thursday, Friday, then finance clinic on a Sunday. So you'll have like a nice rota of things to potentially tune into the channel for. But at the same time, you know, many people will tell you the more lives you do, the less interest people have in the channel because, well, what new is there to say? And that is true to a certain extent. But I think for as long as the conversations work, so we'll continue and see where we go. And obviously, your feedback is really, really important to this as well. So if there's anything you would like to hear or like to see on the channel, by all means, please do let me know. Right, I'm just scanning. 1 second. Thank you very much, Telnator. Thank you very much for smashing the like button as well. Sound King, I'd say it's not just about building credit ratings. When you buy things cash, the bank's liability to pay you money if things go wrong is minimal, whereas having a credit card brings better insurance. That is true. Yeah, that is true. That is very, very true, especially because obviously, you know, a lot of the time, the money that you have deposited in the banks don't actually have that money. So, you know, they talk about having liquidity and the coverage that they have to have for the balances they hold. Yeah, the liability is stronger for the bank, whereas with a credit card, yeah, I mean, it's better insurance for them. And obviously, if they're charging an interest rate, they're also earning money on your transactions too. I saw a really, really good reel the other day, and it was talking about why banks or why transactions via cards are more beneficial to banks. If you think about it, right, if you pay cash, you're paying no fees on that transaction, right? So you pay cash for something, no fees involved. Whereas if you pay with card, the vendor has to pay a fee. So if you think of it that way, more money goes to the bank, the more transactions happen for a £50 transaction. Because typically if you spend 50 quid, that 50 quid is going to end up in somebody else's hand, right? That person then spends it circulates, right? But really, the true value of that 50 quid is still 50 quid, no matter how much it circulates, because there are no fees or transactions being taken from the spending of that 50 quid. Whereas with card transactions, because the vendor's paying a percentage, it could be 1.5%. 1.5% on each transaction of that 50 quid going round goes to the bank. You're going to get to a point where after so many transactions, that 50 quid is spent in transactions alone. And it was an interesting reel, really, to be honest. It actually got me thinking. I was like, yeah, I can see how that benefits the banks, you know, digital. All right, okay. I have got to the bottom of the comments right now, so let me just pick. Yes, I've just done that one. Oh my God, Leo, Jesus, nice. I've saved just over 50% on my annual salary. Leo, oh my God. Listen, can I ask you a favor? If you follow me on Instagram, can you message me, please? I'd love to know how you've done it. The reason why I say this is because people need to hear about how other people have done stuff in order to be like, if they've done that, I could do that. I can replicate some of that for sure. And I would love to know how you've done it. I would really, really love to know how you've done it. Would you mind messaging me on Instagram, please? Please. I'd love to have a conversation with you. And I have an idea, if you wouldn't mind. But it would be great if you could. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you. Okay. I have got to the bottom of it. Okay, let's have a look at these two, and we're going to call it a day here. I didn't cut up 50%, but I cut down well okay by cancelling Netflix earlier in the year. Nice. Buying food stuff in bulk when I can get shopping healthily, but I had to shop around to find the best price. Nice. Thank you, Leo. Appreciate that. Thank you very much. I also didn't bother shopping for summer as usual. I'm wearing my old stuff. Fantastic. You know what? You mentioned something in this one right here. I'm not going to end on a rant, but let me just make a point, right? Because I've seen this so much on social media, it drives me nuts. People are like, oh, you know, I want to save for towards a house, and I know that people are going to say you sound old, Pete, but hear me out. People are like, oh, you know, I want to save for this, I want to save for that, but tell me how a Netflix bill of like $9.99 is going to help me. It's like, it's not about the Netflix per se. It's about the fact that if you have a ton of small transactions, right? So you've got a Netflix, you've got an Amazon Prime, you've got an Apple TV, then let's just say you're using, Klarna and buy now, pay later. It's the accumulation of all of these smaller transactions that lead up to a big number. So when people say, look at the Netflix subscriptions, the Apple subscriptions, the Amazon subscriptions, the small things that you're paying for that you could probably do without, or at least sacrifice in exchange for something else to save a little bit of money, it's not about that one transaction per se. It's about the accumulation of things that you have got. And when you think about this from a behavioral point of view as well, it's very, very easy to get into the cycle of signing up to small, seemingly inexpensive things that accumulate to large sums of money. And I'll give you a case study. I did last year Secret Spenders on Channel 4. And one of the couples that we worked with, buy now, pay later, Klarna was just all over the shop. She was buying shoes, designer gear, like every single week there was something going on. And obviously, as part of the show, I asked them, they need to send me all of their statements so I can run a proper coaching session. And that's what I did for the show. You didn't get to see any of it because they edit it down. But when I went through all of the statements, I added up all of her Klarna. And believe me, it was like, it started off little. £4, £5, £10, £11, £4, £8.99, then £20 here and there. By the time you add everything up across multiple transactions, which again, seemingly inexpensive transaction to sign up for. Oh yeah, I'll buy that and I'll pay over 4 or 5 transactions. But actually that's a month and a half. That's 2 months worth of payments that you're making. When I added all of it up, came to about £180 a month. So it's not the individual thing, it's the accumulation of things that you potentially pick up that make the problem so much bigger and make the inefficiencies in your budget and your spending so much bigger, to the point that it materially impacts other areas of your finances and other areas of your life. Because this money is there to enhance life. Money is a tool, life is for living, right? That's the whole point. So, it's small things that add up, and it's small things that tell a bigger picture. And that's why things like Netflix can lead to much, much bigger conversations in the scheme of things. Anyway, there we go. Thank you so much for joining me, guys. I appreciate every single one of you. Thank you so much for the engagement. I really do appreciate it. Enjoy your week. I will see you again Thursday, and then possibly on Sunday as well for Finance Clinic, depending on what I'm doing. But have an amazing evening. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, surprise, a little different than you're used to. Yeah. Dropping these bars on YouTube, knowledge I introduce you. Yeah. We chasing this money like it's the prize, it's the voodoo. Fugazi, it's just a lie we buying into. We need some cars on deck. Get the rollies, get the Moe, all the Mars on deck. We got the traders, got the picture with the Bentley in Dubai. Are you dripping in designer, looking fly? On the bombardier, sipping on the wine. Broke man, we broke. Where's the fun in being broke? Stocks and bonds get you yo. That's what I'm teaching these folks. I see that smoke, see them choke. Getting coke. While I'm researching these stocks, buying coke. 20 months on the channel, million people taking note. I got